What if I told you it wasn't even called the Super Bowl? Nowadays, it's the largest sporting event in the world with hundreds of millions of viewers every year. But how did the NFL create the Super Bowl and turn it into the world's most popular event? Which teams and players have been the most successful in its history? We've dug deep into the archives this time to break down the entire history of the Super Bowl for you. And there's no better place to start than Super Bowl I.
This is it, the American Football League National Football League Championship. The Kansas City Chiefs, winner of the championship in the newer AFL against the Green Bay Packers, who have won the NFL championship.
The game was different back then. At halftime, college marching bands were playing, and the actual players were kicking back rather than strategizing. At halftime, Kansas City Chiefs quarterback Len Dawson enjoyed a cigarette and a beer to wind down. Could be the reason his team lost that day. But before the big game was a thing, there was no big game. The clash in 1996 would set the foundation for what we know as the NFL and the Super Bowl today. But how did we get to this point? You see, back in 1905, the sport was dying, literally. When football was originally created in 1869, there were no helmets, no shoulder pads, heck, there were barely any rules. Players resorted to pure violence, biting and fistfighting on the field. And with games being more brawls than anything, players were literally dying. It was so savage in the early days, considering that the game was stolen or borrowed from rugby, maybe the violence wasn't that odd after all. In 1905, though, the violence was out of hand. Over 19 football-related deaths that year almost had the game banned. It would be three men that would become its saviors: Walter Camp, Jim Thorpe, and none other than the 26th President of the United States himself, Theodore Roosevelt, pushed key rule changes and innovations that would eventually lead to the birth of the American Professional Football Association in 1920. Which in 1922 changed its name to the National Football League. The beginning of professional football, though, was pretty rough. With salaries being terrible, players often had real jobs just to make ends meet. So, with miners and milkmen filling the ranks, there were plenty of teams out there, but almost none have survived to today's game. All of them needed to borrow money to just stay afloat, but that would all change when the NFL pulled off one major move that would make football the most popular sport in America. With set game schedules, hefty player salaries, the NFL draft, safety equipment, and most importantly, nationally televised games, professional football took off.
This is Chuck Thompson speaking to you from Yankee Stadium, where the Baltimore Colts are playing in the first overtime period in the history of professional football.
He gives to Amici, and the ball game is over. Alan Amici has scored the touchdown, and the Baltimore Colts are the professional football champions of the world.
The greatest game ever played marked the beginning of the NFL's rise to the top of the United States sports market, as it was the first game in history to be nationally televised. By 1960, football had become the most popular sport in America, but the NFL's position as market leader was in danger. A businessman from Dallas named Lamar Hunt desperately wanted to own an NFL team. With superstar players like Jim Brown and Johnny Unitas that drew massive crowds to games, Hunt was convinced that owning a team was the best thing one could do. But as his dream of owning a franchise was denied again and again by the NFL, he decided to take matters into his own hands. So Lamar Hunt gathered other like-minded and deep-pocketed businessmen and created their own league.
The American sports scene came to life in 1960 with the birth of the American Football League.
Suddenly, the NFL had a serious competitor when it came to TV rights, the draft, game day attendances, and most importantly, competition for signing the best players.
These players have got the choice. For the first time in, I guess, 10 years, they have a choice of where they can go play.
Two representatives from the Cardinals came to my dormitory in University of Alabama, and we met up in my dorm room, asked me what I wanted to sign. And I told them $200,000, and they both leaned back. Oh my goodness, fell down on the bed. The guy was standing here and leaned back against the wall screaming like they were in agony. My first meeting with David A. Sonny Werblin, Mr. Werblin, and Weeb Eubank took place at the Beverly Hills Hotel. Not my dorm room, at the Beverly Hills Hotel in Los Angeles. Mr. Werblin started out, listen, I don't want to quibble over money. We want you. New York wants you. This is what I'm going to offer you. I want you to take it. $300,000 to play for the Jazz. This $300,000 went up a bit after we negotiated things.
In 1966, the bidding war on players had turned into an actual financial threat to both leagues.
They were rating our quarterbacks, they were rating our stars, and we were going back and rating theirs. Can't operate a business that way. And it was just the whole thing was coming apart.
There's been an awful lot of rumors. Right now, they claim that the National Football League and the American Football League might merge into 3 conferences.
Well, our main concern right now in the NFL is making it as strong as possible.
June 8, 1966 was the day the National and American Football Leagues agreed to merge and become one. This marked the end of the AFL and the NFL as separate leagues.
Who does this panel think won the war? Who won the war?
I feel that the league mattered.
The first NFL title game after the merger was set in January of 1967 and was officially named the AFL-NFL World Championship Game. Since 1902, college football teams had scheduled what would be called bowl games against each other, often named after something specific to the state it was played in. The Rose Bowl in California was the first one in 1902. Others followed. When Lamar Hunt, during a media interview, referred to the AFL-NFL championship game as the Super Bowl, the press took it and ran with it. The big game got its unofficial moniker spread through the press for months before it was actually played, so it stuck. Lamar Hunt later recalled that he had the name in his head because his children for weeks on end had been playing with a Super Ball toy. After the Packers' 35-10 victory in Super Bowl I, and every game after that had America hooked and craving more, it still remains the only Super Bowl to never have sold out, despite tickets only costing $6 a piece. A couple of years later, in conjunction with Super Bowl III, the media was still driving the popularity of the sport.
But Namath has not been bashful this week, and he has said that the Jets are going to win. He doesn't even predict it. He said, I guarantee a Jet victory.
During an interview leading up to the big game, star quarterback Joe Namath famously guaranteed a victory for his 19.5-point underdog New York Jets against the Baltimore Colts. The price for a 30-second TV commercial during the Super Bowl was now at $55,000. And as the Jets did end up upsetting Baltimore, the AFL side of the league gained credibility as the Jets hoisted their first Lombardi Trophy. Although at that point, the trophy was just engraved World Professional Football Championship, it was not until 1970, when Packers legendary coach Vince Lombardi passed away from cancer, that the trophy was renamed the Lombardi Trophy as an acknowledgement to his contributions to the game. He did win the first 2 Super Bowls after all. The 1970s and 80s would bring a surge of interest to the event, as these years would see the NFL's first dynasties. In the early 70s, the Miami Dolphins had built themselves a championship-caliber team that did nothing else but win. In 1972, they finished the season with a 17-0 record after their first Super Bowl VII victory over Washington. A perfect season. No team has achieved it since. Although some have come close. After winning the Super Bowl again the year after, their reign was over, and the first NFL dynasty would emerge.
We got the best offense, the best defense, and we got the terrible talent.
The Pittsburgh Steelers had a profound impact on the overall popularity of the game, making football must-see. Those Steeler teams would sport over 9 Hall of Fame players and would dominate the entire 70s landscape as they closed out the decade with an incredible 4 Super Bowl titles in 6 years. The business of the NFL was booming at this point. The average price for a 30-second Super Bowl television ad had risen from $55,000 in 1969 to $222,000 in 1979. Despite getting defeated by the Steelers during Super Bowl XIV in 1979, the Dallas Cowboys had seen their fair amount of success during the 70s as well, reaching 5 Super Bowls, winning 2 of them, and getting dubbed America's team in the process. 2 out of 5 might not sound that good, but to the Minnesota Vikings and their fans, it sounded like a dream. Minnesota would make it to the big game 4 times during the 70s, but didn't manage to win a single one. And to this day, Minnesota still hasn't won a Super Bowl. Sorry, Vikings fans, but they are not alone. To this day, 11 other teams have never hoisted the Lombardi. We can't cover the entire history of the Super Bowl without mentioning the Raiders. From 1976 to 1983, Raider Nation saw their team win 3 championships in iconic fashion. Characters like Ken the Snake Stabler, Jack the Assassin Tatum, Freddie Bolitnikoff, and Marcus Allen was must-see TV.
Crockett giving to Allen, sending him wide left. He has to reverse his field, but he gets away for a moment, comes back up the middle of 30, 25, 40, past 2 minutes off.
As the decade turned, the 80s would belong to the 49ers. With superstars like Jerry Rice, Joe Montana, and Roger Craig on offense, the Niners would win 4 Super Bowls, dominating the 80s. And it was all launched in 1981 thanks to possibly one of the most iconic plays in NFL history. Despite the Niners' onslaught running Bill Walsh's famous West Coast offense, the decade would ironically become just as famous for great defensive teams winning the Super Bowl. None became more famous than the '85 Bears that put together most likely the best defensive unit of all time, winning Super Bowl 20 in dominant fashion. Of course, it helped that their offense had perhaps the best running back of all time, Sweetness. Walter Payton impacted the sport profoundly throughout his career and remains to this day one of the most beloved players in NFL history. The New York Giants and the Washington Redskins snatched a couple of Super Bowl wins each by playing excellent defensive football and running the football on offense. The Giants, with MVP Lawrence Taylor, would obliterate opponents any given Sunday, while Washington, led by their offensive line, the Hogs, would maul opposing teams on both sides of the ball. The 80s was smash-mouth football at its best. During the 80s, 1984 to be specific, another phenomenon was created.
Today we celebrate the first glorious anniversary of the information purification directives. We have created, for the first time in all history, a garden of pure ideology.
The cost of a 30-second TV commercial was now at $368,000, and during Super Bowl 28, a company named Apple decided to air perhaps the most famous commercial in advertising history to promote their new Macintosh computer. The commercial would start a sensation. Soon, corporate America was licking their chops at the opportunity to do the same and would await the Super Bowl each year to air their best ads in front of the nation. And the nation embraced it with open arms, making a game out of ranking their favorite spots during the actual game. To this day, watching the commercials on Super Bowl Sunday is a cultural phenomenon by itself. As the 90s was ushered in, the popularity of the NFL and especially the Super Bowl grew. Over 80 million people tuned in every year to watch the big game. And in efforts to grow this even further, the league had to get creative. But how do you make the world's biggest live sporting event even bigger? You hire the world's biggest pop star to perform at halftime. The 1993 Super Bowl might be the most pivotal one in Super Bowl history. Not for the play on the field, which saw the Dallas Cowboys blow out the Buffalo Bills 52-17, nor for the cost of a 30-second TV commercial, which by now had reached $850,000, but for the NFL's mastery of attracting attention. Viewership exploded. Over 133 million people tuned into the game to see MJ put on a show of a lifetime. From this point on, the halftime shows would become almost as important as the game itself. People to this day tune into the game just for the halftime show, and we've had some great ones over the years. But you can't tell the history of the Super Bowl in the 90s and not mention the Buffalo Bills. The 1993 Super Bowl would not be the only one they'd fall short in. From 1990 to 1994, the Bills would make it to 4 straight Super Bowls, losing them all. Bills fans, who are some of the most passionate fans in the NFL, were heartbroken. The Dallas Cowboys fan base, on the other hand, would experience the complete opposite. They would see their team finally dethrone the 49ers and winning 3 Super Bowl championships on the backs of their superstar triplets, Troy Aikman, Emmitt Smith, and Michael Irvin. They were indeed America's team during the beginning of the 90s and would grow into NFL's most valuable franchise by the end of the decade. The Niners did get another punch-in before folding for the rest of the 90s and most of the 2000s as they took home another Super Bowl with quarterback Steve Young, Jerry Rice, and Deion Sanders on the roster, all future Hall of Famers. Deion is an interesting story. He would sign with the arch-rival Cowboys the following year and win the Super Bowl again. And as primetime double-dipped in the championship cookie jar, so did the NFL. A 30-second ad during Super Bowl 30 in 1996 was now sitting comfortably over that magic $1 million mark. As the decade drew to an end, the 90s would see the Broncos and the Packers emerge as the teams to beat. Packers, led by Brett Favre, would win Super Bowl 31, their first championship since Super Bowl II in 1967. The Denver Broncos would rise up as well, led by their own strong-armed future Hall of Famer, John Elway. The Broncos, up to this point, was a heartbreak for loyal Denver fans. They had seen their team reach the Super Bowl 3 times and lose every time. Elway despite all his talent, was considered a choker in big moments. Rumors that all went away when he led the Broncos to back-to-back Super Bowl wins in 1998 and 1999. Elway finally got his championships, and Super Bowl 33 would be his last game. He retired following the 1999 season, leaving an opening for the new rising power in the NFL as the millennium was approaching. So far, we've seen the Steelers, 49ers, and Cowboys dynasties, but none would end up more successful than the New England Patriots during the 2000s. In order to get there, first, they had to go through a team in St. Louis that dominated the NFL from 1999 to 2001. The Rams were the greatest show in the NFL, no doubt, but their demise at the hands of the Patriots would be what gave way to football's biggest superstar of all time. With their win in Super Bowl 36, Brady, Belichick, and the Patriots started their dynasty. And no team has ever dominated close to 2 decades of football the way New England would do throughout the 2000s and 2010s. New England kept on churning and would become back-to-back Super Bowl champions in 2003 and 2004, bringing their total Super Bowl wins to 3 in just 4 years' time. In 2007, though, they assembled perhaps the best overall team in NFL history, and they sure played like it, winning every single game that season except.
And that is it. The New York Giants have knocked off the New England Patriots 17-14 as Tom Coughlin gets a Gatorade bath. They get a final stand on the great Tom Brady, and the Giants, with the most improbable win in recent memory, have won Super Bowl.
A perfect season down the drain. But this wouldn't be the only time Eli Manning would prove to be the kryptonite for Brady and New England. His Giants did it again 4 years later. Throughout the early 2000s, some teams managed to snag a couple of Super Bowls each. The Giants we already mentioned, but there was also the Steelers. Ben Roethlisberger brought the Steel City 2 championships in memorable fashion. Making Steelers head coach Mike Tomlin the youngest head coach in history to win the big game at 36 years of age. Eli Manning's older brother Peyton also won 2 championships, but with 2 different teams. Titletown got into the mix as well and added another Lombardi with Aaron Rodgers at the helm. The Seahawks snatched a championship in 2014 and was about to launch their own dynasty with a repeat the following year, but were stopped in their tracks by you-know-who.
The phenomenal play that wound up in Percy's arms. There are flags on the field for celebration. Amazing. Butler, a rookie free agent. The Patriots were always in the conversation for the best team in the league at this point in time, and as ageless Brady kept winning, so did the NFL on the financial side of things. The cost of a 30-second commercial in 2015 was now at $4.5 million and showed no signs of slowing down. The ticket price to attend in 2015 was $6,600. The NFL had come a long way from the original $6 ticket price during Super Bowl I. But Brady wasn't done, because if he wasn't the undisputed best winner and quarterback of all time by now, he certainly put all those doubts to rest in Super Bowl 51. Second and goal to go from the 2. Toss sweep right for James White. Cuts it under the right arm. Cuts it upfield. Driving forward. Diving to the goal line. A touchdown. And a title for the Patriots. I can't believe it. They have completed the greatest comeback in Super Bowl history.
The biggest comeback in Super Bowl history, his 5th ring, and forever the GOAT. You think he was done? You know the story. Dynasty was breaking at the seams.
Tom Brady, Super Bowl champion for the 7th time.
The 2000s and 2010s would see the New Orleans Saints and the Philadelphia Eagles win their first championships, and towards the end of the 2010s, a new power would rise.
With the 10th pick in the 2017 NFL Draft, the Kansas City Chiefs select Patrick Mahomes, the second quarterback.
You've heard us mention the term GOAT, but have you ever heard of the term baby GOAT? That perfectly describes what Patrick Mahomes is considered today. He isn't even 30 years old, yet he leads a Kansas City Chiefs team that are the current reigning dynasty in the NFL.
Kingdom will raise a banner above the National Football League again.
Since 2019, they have made 4 big game appearances and won 3 championships, the last ones being back-to-back in 2023 and 2024. In the entire history of the Super Bowl, only 8 teams have won back-to-back championships. And here we are, all caught up. Up until this point, no team has won it 3 times in a row. There has also never been a team in history that has won it with a starting rookie quarterback. The price to attend one of these spectacles live will set you back about $10,500. The price of a 30-second commercial during the game is now a modest $7 million. If we look at the all-time standings, the Patriots and the Steelers are even at 6 total Lombardi trophies each, with the Cowboys and 49ers at 5 apiece. Brady alone has 7 championships, the latest of which he won in Tampa Bay. Now retired, it's safe to say it will remain at 7. And there we have it. From the first Super Bowl to the last, this was the entire history of the Super Bowl.